My story begins driving down a long straight road. I'm not going to specify where, for privacy, but I will say it was in the American Midwest. I was nearing where I was supposed to settle for the night. It was a rest stop for rig drivers and such. I knew I could park there to get some sleep in the cabin of my truck. I was still a few miles out when I came across a car. It was in the middle of the lane, and it had all of its doors open, including the trunk. Now, the sun was setting. It wasn't too dark to see, but as I neared the vehicle, I could tell there was nobody in it. It was a real small car, a Mini Cooper, but it was a new year and looked clean. Pulling over, I got out to take a better look. As I thought before, nobody was inside. I could still see quite well into the desert surrounding the road. I took a big look around. I didn't see anyone. So who the heck left their car out here? I debated calling the cops, but decided not to, seeing as whoever the driver was must have been close by. I was getting back into my pickup when I first laid eyes on it. It looked like a scarecrow. Sort of. It was real tall, stocky. It had on a round hat with a big brim, and it hung as still as stone, just looking in my direction from maybe 200 yards off the road. From where I was, I could only see the silhouette, but still it made me feel off. I doubted the area I was in ever used to be farmland, so why was a scarecrow out here? I turned my engine back on and picked up out of there. Something to note, when I tried making out the scarecrow in my rearview mirror as I pulled away, it almost seemed closer to the road than it was before. Thinking it was just because of my mirror, I went down the road, not paying attention to it anymore. So I rolled into the rest stop around 10 o'clock. I parked my truck in the lot. There weren't many other vehicles there, only one other car, some real old trashy-looking sedan, and then there were 2 big rigs. Seeing as it was still open, I went into the diner, sitting down at the counter. It was a pretty nice place, considering it was in the middle of nowhere. I think I ordered soup and a sandwich, or something like that. I was the only one in the place, and the waitress was making conversation with me. Eventually, I mentioned the car I saw a few miles previous that had its hazard lights on. She seemed indifferent at first. Then I brought up the scarecrow, and she stiffened up. She focused, now looking me dead in the eye. A scarecrow, yeah? She talked quieter than she did before. What it looked like? Pretty normal, big old farmer hat, I replied. She just sorta looked at me after that. Finally, she spoke again. Was it looking at you? I thought for a moment, remembering how the scarecrow was oriented towards me from where I saw it. I mean, yeah, I guess. She looked at me solemnly, before handing me my food and vanishing into the kitchen. I won't lie, I was pretty freaked out by that. I thought about it while I ate. It's not like a scarecrow could have been watching me after all. They're inanimate. But the more I thought, the more scared I got. From where I saw it the first time, it was maybe an easy 25 degrees off axis with the road. But when I saw it next, in my truck's mirror, it was still facing directly towards me, so it must have been almost 45 degrees at that point. It seemed impossible, and I couldn't help but think about the abandoned car, too. It was just unsettling. So I had a little trouble getting to sleep that night. It wasn't noisy or anything, in fact, no other vehicles rolled in at all. Eventually, I managed to drift off, sleeping okay for the most part. I got up around 8 in the morning. After doing my minimal morning routine, I decided to head into the same diner to grab some breakfast. There were more people there than there was before, probably 5 or 6 other customers. When I walked in, it was like a pariah, though. Everyone went quiet, stopping their eating and their conversations to look at me. It was weird as heck, looking around the room and seeing everyone stare back at you. Slowly, I took a seat at the counter. I was 4 stools away from the closest guy, but as soon as I sat down, he grabbed his paper and headed out the door, leaving his partially eaten food on the table. A different waitress from last night came up to me, just staring with her notepad in hand. I asked for scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee, but she didn't say anything. Rather, she just eyed me weird. I did get my food a little while later, and it tasted fine. So I finished up in that awfully quiet diner, leaving a pretty generous tip for the girl considering the service. When I headed out the door, though, I freaked. Directly in front of me, but way back on the other side of the big road, was the scarecrow. In the daylight, I could make it out well. It was really tall, maybe around 6 or 7 feet. It was made of hay and draped in a black and gray shirt and dark pants. Its hat was real strange. It was nice looking, yeah, obviously expensive, but vintage too, made out of premium leather. I knew it was the same scarecrow from before because of how big the hat was. I just stared in awe. How the heck did it get there? So I was pretty much done at that rest stop, and the scarecrow wasn't making me want to stick around any longer. Still eyeing it, I hopped in my truck. To my relief, the engine turned over fine, and I pulled out of the place. Getting back onto the road, I came probably within 20 feet of the scarecrow. I looked at it, and it just sort of sat there, unsuspectingly. Down the road I went, but guess what I saw 5 minutes later? Another scarecrow. I took a double take out my window when I saw it coming up, but sure as heck it was really there. I pulled over, getting out of my truck. Where I was, all that was around was desert, yet that scarecrow stood right in the middle of it, a few yards from the road. I looked at it. It was the exact same one as the one I saw before, with that textured old leather hat, dark clothes, and the same awful height, same thin body. I know what you're thinking. Maybe someone used to own a farm around here. Maybe they used a few of the same looking scarecrows. But it wasn't like that. From the orientation of the hat and its pose, I knew it was the exact same one. It was simply too perfect. I approached the thing, trying to rationally sort out what was going on. Its eyes I could see well. There were these thick black buttons, like 3 inches in diameter. Looking at it, though, I began to think how silly it was to be afraid of a scarecrow. It's not like it could do anything to me, right? I walked up to it, kind of childlike. I took off its hat, revealing a pointy straw head. I laughed, again cursing myself for being childish. The hat itself was really nice, actually. It had that feeling of vintage leather. I played with it a bit. On the underside, it had a little logo etched into it. It read, Mr. Watcher. Not any brand I'd ever heard of before. Being satisfied with my dissection of the scarecrow, I went to slap its hat back on. Only, I couldn't. Because it was gone. The scarecrow that was just in front of me a minute ago was now missing. What the heck? I said aloud. I looked around. My truck was still there. Everything seemed normal. Yeah. So where the heck did the scarecrow go? Its hat was still in my hands. After that, I decided I'd had enough. I packed it back in my truck, dropping the hat in the seat next to me. I didn't bother trying to explain to myself what happened. I just wanted to leave. About 10 minutes of 70 miles per hour later, I was feeling okay again, until it rolled into view, another scarecrow on the same side of the road. Only this time it wasn't wearing the hat. I drove past it, barely looking at it, and accelerating a little more. I could have sworn it turned its head to look at me. A minute later, I saw another. I kept going. Another and another, always in the same position, the same clothes, all without a hat. I just kept driving, sweating and freaking out. The next one I passed, I watched in the rear view as I sped by. I saw its reflection slowly get more distant until finally, just when it was almost out of view, it started to run. I swear to you, I saw its legs turn, and I watched it sprint back into the desert, faster than a man or animal could, for that matter. At this point, I must have been nearing the top speed of my truck. Every minute or so, I saw the same darned scarecrow out of my window. I probably saw it 50 times until I thought I heard it scream. When I pulled past it, I swear it yelled. It sounded inhuman. Its voice stretched and unnatural, like its vocal cords really were made out of straw. Without thinking, I rolled down my window, tossing the leathery old hat out. Then I prayed, all the while pushing it well over the speed limit. To my surprise, though, I didn't see it anymore. I began to slow down a little. Another 10 minutes went by, and I didn't see another scarecrow. I never saw it again after that. It just stopped appearing. To this day, I still have no clue how the heck it kept up with me. If I had to guess, it probably did something to the driver of that Mini Cooper, though. And I'll be honest, I really don't want to know what. I'm done with long desert roads. If you ever see any cars without drivers in the middle of a barren stretch of desert, I reckon you avoid them, or you might run into Mr. Watcher. I used to drive coast to coast in an old Peterbilt. At the time of this experience, it was probably midnight. I was driving through Iowa, and my destination was somewhere near a town called Clinton in Iowa. I think I was going about 75 miles per hour on a 2-lane road when suddenly I felt my back tire blow out. As with any flat I'd had, I pulled over. I immediately took notice of my surroundings. I was at the side of the road, near a very wooded place, and it was quite dark. The only lights I could see were mine and the occasional car that passed by. I walked over to my tire with the new one, only to see that the tire wasn't just flat, it had been sliced open as I was driving. That's weird. I decided to look around for the culprit, the thing that had cut my tire. I must have walked a few feet away from the trailer, closer toward the woods, when I heard my truck shift into gear without me. I went running full speed towards my truck. I noticed a figure in the cab. I threw open the passenger side door, only to see that no one was there. I jumped into the passenger seat and put the thing back into park, wondering what the heck just happened. I decided I needed to get some rest, because I felt like I was going crazy. I locked up the cabin and fell asleep for about an hour, before I suddenly heard another tire on my rig blow out. Heart pounding in my chest, I grabbed my grandpa's old rifle, then jumped out of the cab. The moment I landed on the ground and looked toward the back of the truck, I saw a figure running away into the woods. Something or someone was trying to sabotage my truck, but for what purpose? At that point, I was scared to death. I got back in the semi and drove off, which wasn't very safe considering the tires. But at the first gas station I saw, I got out and changed the tires myself. Then I fell asleep for a while. About a month later, I quit driving a semi, and even still that incident creeps me out. So now, I just enjoy watching the trucks drive past my house. This story happened in 2019, and would continue on until spring of 2021. That's when I graduated from my college. My college has a paranormal investigators club. For the sake of anonymity, I won't say which club or university. I'd become the president of the club in my freshman year, the spring of 2018. because I seemed to be really active in the club, as I wanted there to be more events and investigations. After a few investigations, both on and off campus, I firmly believed that there was something out there. What it was, I don't know, but my findings were compelling in themselves. Now, the first part of this story starts a little before November 9th, 2019. There was a building on campus that was always spiritually dead, and we used it to train new members. I was a strict club president and modeled my views from Taps in the Ghost Hunter show. I wanted my investigators to, above all else, debunk claims, figure out the rational explanation, and if they were unable to do so, either alone or as a group, then what we captured moved into the category of unexplained. On the night of November 9th, my vice president, a senior member, and a new recruit headed into the building. With them was an EMF detector, which is supposedly able to detect the presence of spiritual or energy anomalies. They also had a broken flashlight, a walkie-talkie to communicate with my group, and an audio recorder used for capturing EVPs. I wasn't with the group at the time, but I learned everything I needed to know from the recording of that night. I myself was with another group in a different building altogether. Their investigation started off as normal, getting base readings of the area that they were in, explaining what they were doing and why to the new recruit, John, and what he should be looking out for. After about an hour of them walking through the entire building, my vice president, Carmen, and our senior member, Dave, elected to sit in the lobby area on the second floor, just next to the elevator. Carmen had the audio recorder. She placed it in front of her. Dave had set up the flashlight, and John had the EMF detector in front of him. They began calling out, asking any potential entities questions, trying to gain any evidence they could, trying to communicate with any entity they could. As I said before, though, it was mostly to show John what kind of questions to ask. Up to that point, the flashlight had been blinking on and off. There was something wrong internally with it, but I was mostly using this as a test to see if John would debunk the flashlight as being broken, rather than it being communication from beyond. While Carmen tried to prompt John into the debunking of the flashlight, she coughed and dropped her phone. Dave then said something faintly. However, listening to the audio gives me chills even today. Briefly on the recording I got back of this happening was the sound of a crying baby. It was louder than the two boys, but quieter than Carmen, so logically it had to be between them. The creepy part was that no one heard it while being there. It only showed up later on the audio recording. There was no way it was one of the investigators, nor was it anyone sneaking around. Security had to let their group in and lock the door behind them as per usual. They were the only three in the building. The story doesn't end there, though. A couple of months after, just after COVID hit the state, we were allowed to go back to this building via special permissions. Only 3 of us were allowed in because of the pandemic, and so I myself went along with our club advisor, Cassie, and another of our senior members, Autumn. All of us wore masks and remained socially distant, as per the rules of the pandemic. I began setting up equipment where the original recording was captured, while the others were talking. Every now and then, the 2 girls would glance down this really long hallway. I'm talking as long as a football field. Apparently, they had seen something out of the corner of their eyes. Cassie eventually brings this up to me, so I suggest that they tell me what they're seeing separately to see if they are seeing the same thing. Cassie tells me she was seeing a figure that looked like it was twitching and crawling across the floor every now and then, sort of like what the ghost from The Grudge did. Autumn tells me that at the very same time, she'd been seeing what looked to be a tall man with a hat. I told them that they are seeing 2 very different things. I had a full-spectrum camera on hand, so I told them I would go down the hallway and place it at the end and see if we couldn't capture these shadows on footage. We continued sitting where we were for hours, asking questions. For a long time, nothing happened. until down the hallway it sounded like something or someone was screaming in horrible pain. We ran down there, trying to find whoever was in here. They may be injured or needed medical assistance. In the end, we didn't find anyone. Suddenly, Autumn discovered a door that made a really squeaky noise when opened or closed. She let it swing closed on its own, and it sounded awful. Cassie and I left Autumn at the door with a walkie-talkie while we walked back to where we were. I radioed her to let it swing shut, and the screaming we heard before and the noise this made were identical. We then had to ask the question of how it shut on its own. There was no wind or breeze or anything like that, nor was there anyone else to shut the door in here. The thing had actually swung open on its own somehow. We decided to end our investigation there, packing up everything as we hadn't seemed to communicate with much. We went home, and I began sifting through the evidence with my roommate the next day. What we found still shocks me to see with my own eyes. Just before the screaming door closed, a shadow of something twitchy and crawling seemed to appear briefly, almost as if it was flickering. It crawled in the direction of the door. When it disappeared from the camera was when the door swung shut. From then on, whenever we investigated this building, especially this area, we always got something we couldn't explain on our recording devices, or had some pretty strange personal experiences that will live on with us forever. Whatever this thing was, I don't believe it was human, nor do I believe that it liked humans. It always managed to freak my team and I out. It did give us some great stories and various mental scars, of which we will have to live with. But I do fear for those who investigate this building in the future without proper preparation, as this field I've seen firsthand can be dangerous. I'm a long-haul truck driver, so I'm no stranger to the States. I've seen things that I can't explain, but this is by far the weirdest thing to ever happen to me. I was driving through Arizona, heading westbound on I-40. I'd finally hit Flagstaff and got to a truck stop so I could handle my business. As I departed Flagstaff, I ran by mile marker 185. It's about 10 miles from Flagstaff, Arizona. As I passed mile marker 185, there was what seemed to be a person hitchhiking. The only problem was this guy was huge, like 8 feet tall, looking straight into the passenger window of my semi-truck. On top of that, he seemed to be as wide as the truck from shoulder to shoulder. I passed this hitchhiker. About half a mile down the road, I saw the exact same person or thing. Once again, I passed him. But once again, it kept happening, even 20 miles down the road to mile marker 165. I saw him every few miles. After I passed marker 165, I didn't see him anymore. So I thought that was done with. It was over. But I was dead wrong. I got down to mile marker 145, and I had to take a leak, so I pulled over on the side of the road to handle my business. I was about halfway done when I heard an ear-piercing scream, mixed between what sounded like a deer and a human. As soon as I heard it, I jumped and began to look around. Just outside the halo of my headlights, I spotted it. I was never more confused and scared in my life. I tried to figure out what it was, and I heard something flying through the air. Suddenly, I heard a thump, thump. Sitting 3 feet away from me was a huge rock the size of a basketball. It must have been 80 pounds. That thing had thrown it at me, and it landed only 3 feet away. I wasted no time trying to hop back in the truck, getting away from whatever that thing was. As I passed it, it just stared me down, and I never saw it again. Can someone tell me what I saw?